Hello, guys, and welcome back to a brand new instant reaction. We're two men weaving it today. John Tortorelli is joining me, and we got to talk about the variety of great game threes we got tonight. The Lakers and the Timberwolves was a thriller. The Bucks and the Pacers, the Bucks won that game handily, and the Magic and the Celtics was an amazing game that came down to the wire. We're gonna talk about the Lakers and Wolves first. Riv, Dels, and Drew are not here today. Friday night, it's very late. I understand it 100%. It's almost 1 in the morning in the East Coast. But, John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a pretty unique last couple of days in the playoff calendar. We've had some upsets, some teams that are clawing their way back to the series, making things interesting. I think that's great that a couple of these series look like they could be a little more interesting than what we thought those first few games maybe.
I feel like we have to talk about the Lakers and Timberwolves game first. I was ecstatic when Anthony Edwards hit the clutch three that basically sealed the game.
Mhm.
He was amazing in the last 5 minutes of this basketball game. And I think Anthony Edwards has just taken a noticeable leap in his playmaking that some people didn't think was possible. He had 29 points and 8 assists tonight and 8 rebounds as well. And I feel like the amount of passes that he's making, difficult passes that he's making, is far more than what we were seeing even a couple months ago. He is steadily
Mhm.
improving in that area of his game.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest keys, I think, especially down the stretch in these tight fourth quarters where the T Wolves in past seasons have relied on him as the engine, and he would show growth in moments, but it wasn't consistent. And I feel so far in this Lakers series, one of the biggest, if not the biggest takeaway is the fact that he's been able to control the game more methodically as the decision maker and leverages more of that elite scoring value that he's been a phenomenal postseason scorer. But being able to translate that to getting all of your teammates going is what allowed them in these tight games to kind of have an edge that they didn't last season, maybe. 'Cause that consistency is what gets guys like Nas Reed and Mike Conley going, who I guess you consider a bit of an X factor. And so far in the series, it feels like Minnesota's got the more complete group. They have a deeper bench. And I feel like it's Ant-Man's playmaking that kind of activates those guys to play more consistent than they have in past years.
I feel like the Lakers lost this game on two things. Number one, the turnovers. They had twice as many turnovers as Minnesota. And number two, Luca didn't have a good game. He was dealing
Mhm.
with food poisoning, I believe it was. He was sick, and you can probably say that's why he played poorly. But there was a play that stuck out to me when Jaden McDaniels is running in transition after a steal, and Luka Doncic is looking at the referee, and he's just looking at it, thinking that they blew a whistle, and he just lets Jaden McDaniels run right past him and get an easy transition bucket. And those are one of those moments where you're like, Luka, you gotta guard the man in front of you and try to
Mhm.
stop a bucket. These are the last couple of minutes of the game.
Yeah. That's been a big question, I feel like, for this Laker team, where last season the Mavericks had an infrastructure to clean up a lot of Luka's mistakes. With Daniel Gafford and then Derek Lively off the bench, you had 48 minutes of rim protection and then quality defensive wings around Luka. Where on their path to the finals, you're able to disguise him. And I feel like this Laker team doesn't have the same infrastructure, especially behind him in the paint. And there's some things with Luka where I feel like if he is banged up and not 100%, you see that effort wax and wane on the defensive end, which it's obviously an issue. I do feel like him not being physically healthy, or of course he's dealing with an illness, that's something where you hope it just doesn't translate into the rest of the series. If it's a one night thing, the Lakers can live with that. But if that's something you see again in game four, that becomes a pretty big issue. Cause like I said, it's not like you have cleaners behind him and on the perimeter that can kind of mitigate those lapses.
That's the biggest problem with the Lakers, and Jaden McDaniels mentioned it when he was interviewed after the game. He said they don't have any rim protectors. We're just trying to attack them because they don't
Mhm.
have any out there. Jackson Hayes is unplayable in this series. He played 9 minutes in this game,
Mhm.
non-factor, and the Timberwolves almost had 60 points in the paint. I think that people overlooked this big weakness the Lakers had because of the star power that they had, but it's pretty apparent that they don't have any big, and it's a big problem. And Minnesota has done a beautiful job in transitioning away from Rudy Gobert in these high leverage moments. And Rudy
Mhm.
Gobert is a fascinating player because we all understand his impact on defense, but on offense, he can't make smaller teams pay in the way that you need a big man to make them pay because of his
Right.
lack of offensive game.
And that's always been the misconception with him. For the longest time, people have always picked at him, and you'll find clips online of Luka or maybe Terrence Mann teeing off corner threes, to where there's a lot of misconceptions around Rudy Gobert. He's never played off the floor because of what he does defensively. And if anything, he's usually been the one that's holding the dam together in that on the floor. It's in key series, like I think of 2021 versus the Clippers, he can't score on Reggie Jackson, who's 7 inches shorter on him in the post. And that's been something where in a game like this, of course, he only plays 25 minutes, does not take a shot attempt. And you look at the Lakers, of course, they want to go 5-on-out, and it feels like Minnesota's been able to match that with their perimeter play in the series. But again, I feel like for a big man that is playing 25 minutes a game and not take a single shot attempt, it emphasizes, for as great as a defensive player as he is, 4-time defensive player of the year, he's never being played off the floor for that. Sure, he can't guard Luke in isolation, maybe as well as a Bam Adebayo, but guys like Bam or Evan Mobley are such rare unicorns. Not many bigs can. So I feel like in a game like this, you need him to get something going, whether it's duck-ins, flip shots, and quite frankly, he doesn't have the touch and the hands around the rim to, like, if he hits a Zubats, is a good example of this in the Nuggets series. If Kawhi or James Harden's out the game, you can get it to Zubats, and he'll have efficient scoring inside 10 feet because around the rim, he's really good. But with Gobert, that's always the reason why you don't see him playing maybe as much as a guy that's getting paid as him would. So that's always bothered me, that misconception with him. I feel like the NBA media has not done a good enough job of highlighting that.
Now, I see this comment in the chat. If we're going to talk about the draft, we will, because Shedeur Sanders still has not been drafted.
That was crazy to me, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, we will get to that. Minnesota's done a beautiful job in just transitioning to small ball. The Nas Reed, Randall, Dante, Edwards, and McDaniels lineup was lethal for them in the fourth quarter to close out the game. How about Jaden McDaniels with 30 points tonight and played amazing defense? Luka Doncic, sick or not, he played amazing defense and he had 30. And this is his second 20-plus point game in this series. I think that his offensive leap that we saw after the new year is very real. And when he has ample opportunity and he's able to attack mismatches, he looks like this. This is the most confident that he's ever looked. And if they're getting this version of Jaden McDaniels, not 30 every night, but a consistent offensive threat, it just changes things for them.
If you're getting 25 points from him on the efficiency he's given them in games 1 and 3, like you said, of course, not only changes things for them, but it gives them an extra layer to their ceiling. Because in this game, he goes 12-17 from 2. The question with Jaden McDaniels has always been consistency in the offensive end, because you have a fluid 6'9" Wayne that can handle a little bit, is really good around the rim. And it's really just been a matter of him consistently applying himself there. And I feel like in the second half of the season, he had one of the biggest turnarounds on the offensive end where Minnesota could start to rely on him as that 4 to that 5, as someone who's going to be really consistent, whether it's an offensive rebounder, a cutter, off-ball mover. And then you add in the shooting, which is obviously the biggest question for him. But I feel like for him to give you the defensive value that he has so far in the series, done as good of a job as you can possibly ask on Luka. When you think of Luka stoppers, it's really just Jaylen Brown and then Wiggins in that 2022 Conference Finals series. But Jaden McDaniels so far has given himself the right to continue showing, I am one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, and I have the versatility. So I feel like he's been not only the biggest X factor, he's the reason why they're up 2-1 in this series. So I feel like if they can get that for the rest of this playoff run, we talk about the Clippers, who are playing very well. They dominated the Nuggets yesterday. We talk about the Thunder, but that immediately puts Minnesota in that top 3 conversation, which they were in for the better part of this year. I think we forget just how good this team was in the regular season, whether it was a top 5 net rating or a top 10 offense or a top 10 defense. And when he's playing at this height, they're good enough to beat any team in the Western Conference. And that includes Oklahoma City if you have Anthony Edwards playing as well as he has in the series.
Now, John, I got a take for you. I think the Timberwolves are winning this series. After 3 games, from what I've seen, up 2 games to 1. I think they're the better team. I think they have more positional versatility. They have better players. The stars for the Lakers are there, but then you look at 4 to 10, it's all Timberwolves players.
Yeah.
I like them a lot. And not only do I like them in this series, but I think they're making a conference finals. With Jimmy Butler's injury, even if they get past Houston, I think it's going to be very difficult to get past Minnesota as well with how amped up they're playing. And I think they're more experienced than the Houston Rockets. I think if the Timberwolves win this series, they're going all the way to the Western Conference Finals.
I could see that. I feel like one thing we mentioned so far, LeBron tonight gave you the absolute best version of himself you can possibly ask for. 20 in the first half, finishes this game with 38 and 10, great efficiency, played one of his best games. And while Luka struggled, it does seem like in the series when Luka has played well, LeBron has struggled. And when LeBron plays an A-plus game, Luka is playing poorly in that matchup. Considering how much versatility they have on the defensive end, Minnesota, that is, and just how solid of a job they've done on Austin Reeves as well. Today, he does have 20 points, 18 shots. But coming to the series, the big question was how can they guard all three of them? And it was how can they match up physically with Luka after losing in 5 in last year's conference finals? When you have the three of those guys not clicking at the same time, I had the Lakers in 7 games. This was the series I wrestled with most. And it was easy for me to see Minnesota playing well enough to win the series. But I feel like with what we've seen so far from LA, it's not a great matchup for them. And it's different than last year with Dallas that had a completely different lineup around Luka. I feel like it showed for as great as Luka has been in the past, and he's a great playoff performer, you're not getting that same portability and supporting cast. And that makes a world of a difference when the Mavericks last year winning the series in 5, and this year Minnesota can win in 6 games.
The Lakers don't have the defensive personnel to stay in front of anybody on Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what gets underrated with the Dallas Mavericks team is that not only do they have good defenders, but they had great rim protectors. And this Lakers team doesn't have that either. Nobody is afraid to attack the basket on Minnesota. McDaniels, Randall, Edwards, they're all getting whatever they want. The play that stood out to me the most was when Anthony Edwards tried to go hero ball late in the fourth, but they double teamed him hard, and he was able to split it and get to the basket. And he should have kicked it out to Naz Reid in the corner, but that's just what it's been. Even if they double team him, he's still able to split it and beat it. And I think that with the Lakers, they're always giving something up defensively because they know they can't stay in front of anybody. They're leaving somebody open from three. And when you leave somebody open from three, Jaden McDaniels, he's not taking those 3-point shots, but he is attacking closeouts and getting to that short mid-range spot, and he's hitting those more efficient shots for him. So I think the Wolves, after game 1, that was a dominant performance. The Lakers took game 2. That was a dominant performance as well. But game 3, it was a game that we saw both teams in a clutch and Minnesota able to win that clutch game. And that gives me a lot of optimism for maybe this team can be good in clutch offense. Maybe they're figuring it out a little bit, especially against the Lakers defense that they just don't have the personnel to guard them. And I think that's the biggest thing they're going to have to wrestle with because Minnesota, they don't have to sacrifice things on defense like the Lakers do. And that's why I think the Lakers are more vulnerable on that end than Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple. The Wolves are the better team.
Now, on to the next game. The Indiana Pacers and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks take game 3, 117-101. Giannis, the idea Antetokounmpo, 37 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists, John. And Gary Trent, 37 in the starting lineup. Torian Prince is out of the starting lineup. Do you think the Bucks have a realistic chance in this series? I feel like this gave me the most optimism just with how they were utilizing Brook. Brook played 14 minutes. Torian Prince played 3 minutes. They have like completely removed the negatives from their lineup. And in this series, when Giannis is on the floor, they're like a plus. The Bucks are like a plus 14. They win the minutes when he's on the floor.
Right. The issue with that is, of course, when Giannis is not on the floor, and today he only played 32 minutes because they won comfortably. It's really an issue where they don't have an opportunity to replace him with someone that can maintain that identity. Today, he was incredible. And I feel like this entire series, you have the best player every single night to make the series competitive. The issue, of course, was Damian Lillard today struggled, goes 2 of 12 from the field in his second game back. And luckily, in his poor play, Gary Trent was there to pick up the slack, going 9 of 12 from three-point land. And this season, he shot the ball very well. Tonight was a good example. Defensively, finishing with 4 steals, a better night on that side of the floor. When he's shooting as well as this, it gives you a chance. But I feel like it's important to note this was an off night from Indiana, and you're going to have 1 or 2 of these from a team that is going to take a good amount of shots in the perimeter. I feel like this is the type of win for the Bucks, which at home you needed. But at the same exact time, I don't think it changes a whole lot in this series because this blow-up game by Gary Trent isn't something you can rely on consistently, even if Dame's going to play better than he did tonight. I feel like with Milwaukee, it not only is about them making their shots, which today they only hit about 36% of their threes, but it's a night in, night out question of how much energy you're going to get. And I just can't see this Indiana offense continuing to have more off nights like today. So I feel like this series is kind of something that's optimistic. It leaves you an opportunity for the Bucks to tie it up 2-2 here, but given the fact that Indiana is the better team and you're not going to get this same level of play from your top. I mean, you get 37 points from Giannis and Gary Trent in this game, but we saw throughout the entire regular season that Dame and Giannis were neither of them were maximized when put together. And I feel like a night like tonight is just not replicable.
So you're not buying into Doc Rivers saying that he has no concern level about this series and he's very confident
I'd
about
hope
this
he's saying
series.
that. For someone that's been coaching for 20 years, that's the only thing he can say. But it really just is a question of how much two-way player getting from the supporting cast. And you look at the roster and it's really thin in that aspect.
So many players on the Pacers, well, not so many, but really their main players. Halliburton had 14,
Turner
Nemhard
played
had
more than 9.
6, Turner had 6 points. I'm not expecting that. Even TJ McConnell had 0 points. I'm not expecting that consistently. So I think game 3 was just one of those games for the Bucks where everything went right for them outside of Dame playing well. And it's their first home game. The crowd is amped up. They're excited. And if they win game 4, now we really have a series because it's going to get dicey. But for now, I don't know if I'm going to overreact to it. It's just Giannis being Giannis, having a masterclass. And really in this series, he's been unbelievable. He deserves nothing but credit. He's averaging 35, 36 with double-digit rebounds, 5+ assists on incredible efficiency. The Pacers have just had no answer for him. It's just the Bucks haven't been able to support him enough in games 1 and game 2. But I am optimistic about the adjustment that they made of just not playing Brook Lopez as much because when they play Brook, it's just you just are giving up a free 10 points with how much the Pacers run and gun. With Giannis at the 5, it just gives them more defensive versatility to guard all the actions that the Pacers have.
Right, and this was a big Giannis game too in the free throw shooting department. Today he goes 9 of 10 from the field, and after the first couple of games where he goes 8 of 15 and 6 of 10, that's another part of his game where if he rises to that level of being a good free throw shooter, as a scorer, there's nothing that you can do over Indiana because he's finishing at the best level of any player in this postseason. I mean, these first few games, I feel like it's continuing to highlight just how he's kind of underappreciated that. He's been hurt the last 2 postseasons, so we haven't seen the peak version of him. But over the last couple of years, we've seen in the regular season, there's nothing that you can quite do when he gets to the rim. And I feel like this Indiana front court's too thin to contain him in that. But I feel like the free throw shooting for him in this game, it's an encouraging thing because you need Giannis, especially with how limited they've been on the offensive end around him. You need him to be hitting 3 throws to kind of help them in these close games. No, today wasn't quite that, but it definitely is a big plus for Milwaukee.
Now, the other game 3 game that happened, the Magic take game 3, 95-93. The Celtics had an extra possession here to potentially hit a game winner. Jason Tatum didn't get much help from his super team squad, John. He had 36 on and 4. Derek White played well. Jaylen Brown was up and down. Porzingis wasn't good. Horford didn't give them much. Pritchard didn't give them much. This was one of those games where my main takeaway is just how unbelievably great the duo of Paolo and Franz are. I think that the more we're watching them play, the more they're figuring out how to play with each other, which is huge for their outlook. Paolo had 29 and 6, and Franz had 32, 7, and 8. He had 8 assists in this game. This
With
wasn't a game.
shooters that they picked up the Y.
In this game, the Magic didn't shoot well from 3. They shot 25% from 3, but their defense carried them. They forced Boston to have 19 turnovers. The crowd was really in it. And in this series, all 3 games, Paolo and Franz have been amazing for all 3. The efficiency numbers aren't going to wow you. Paolo's at 55% true shooting. Franz is at 50% true shooting. But what wows you is the fact that they're doing this with a poor supporting cast, and you can see what it can look like if they have better players around them. But clearly, these 2 guys are one of the most talented duos in the NBA.
Yeah, this was a game for me, which it really just came down to 2 stars having 2 really, I mean, Franz in this game does go 3 of 13 from 3-point land. The 3-point shot, it hasn't looked good all postseason, really throughout the last 2 years. But I feel like for Orlando, this is one of those Paolo blow up games where he's been giving you elite production as a 21-year-old with the worst shooting and the worst spacing. And the Celtics don't react to their supporting cast because none of them can create an advantage. And I feel like Orlando has built their identity on getting stops defensively. And so far in the series, this was Tatum's best game far and away. He's shooting better. He's kind of controlling this game entirely. But I feel like for him, like you highlighted, Kristaps Porzingis has struggled a lot through these first couple of games, and it kind of has raised that question a little bit. You go on a dominant finals run last year without Porzingis for the better half of that run. He comes off the bench in game one and plays fantastic, but I do think that's an important thing to monitor throughout this postseason, the way that he's shooting, because it hasn't been good at all. You don't have Drew Holiday in this game, who's out with a hamstring injury, so it put a lot of the emphasis on him playing well and Horford, and tonight wasn't their night. I also feel like Orlando's intensity, they've been good rotationally around the perimeter, not giving up any open shots for the most part. And I feel like if you're not going to hit shots, you're going to make 8 threes in this game. The least you can do is be on your P's and Q's defensively, which they were. But I just found it frustrating for the supporting cast. Orlando has tried to make a lot of moves to support them as shooters. And I feel like there's another level of Paolo that he can tap into if you put him with merely average shooters. And like I said before, just a guard who could create. I mean, this has been a year from hell for Cole Anthony for the most part offensively, where he's dealt with injuries, has not played well at all. And it truly is mind-boggling to me just how bad Contavious Caldwell-Pope has been on the offensive end. And people gave Paul George shit all season long when he wasn't 100% and he was getting injections to play. And the Sixers year is done from the start because Embiid wasn't healthy. KCP has been the worst signing from this all season. I know defensively he's fit in well and it's been helpful having him without Jalen Suggs, but he was woeful for the majority of the season offensively. They gave him $20 million for the next 3 years, and it's quite clear that Nikola Jokic helped extend his prime offensively because he makes everybody around him better to a degree that no other star in the NBA quite can. He comes to Orlando, he can't hit water from a boat. He's not going to create an advantage. And that was what they should have been targeting this offseason. Guards like Kobe White, even if you're not going to swoop in for a player like Anthony Simons who doesn't fit into your identity, at least getting a guard with some size would have been such a big difference. So it's so frustrating that we've talked about Orlando every other week. And I say the same exact thing every time we talk about them because this is the worst three-point shooting team since the 2012 Bobcats that went 7-59. And yet this Orlando team was dragged to the playoffs with that type of supporting cast offensively. And you want to know what it reminds me of? Jason Tatum in 2021, where Jaylen Brown's out for the postseason. They don't have a good supporting cast. They finished the year 500, and they trot into a series where the Nets' big three healthy, and they got spanked. But what does Tatum do? He drops 50. He gets you a win. I feel like with Paolo and Franz Wagner, it's a similar story. Now, obviously, Franz has been healthy this year in the postseason, like Jaylen Brown was then. But I feel like Orlando is at the same exact inflection point as Boston a few years ago. They need to make some moves. They need to get some two-way players because if they do, they could win a series like this. But of course, until they have some level of support offensively, I feel like you're going to see this be a 5 or 6 game series where this star duo is being failed by a small market team that's operating as such and not showing much ambition. So I think it's a nice sneak peek for the future, and it puts some urgency on the Orlando Magic to make some big boy moves this offseason. About time they put these two with some good shooters. This was a close game. I want to talk about that a little bit more, where it felt like Orlando had the lead for the majority of it. At the end of the game, you did get a little bit nervous with Paolo with that backcourt violation. It felt like there's too much pressure on them to be lead creators. And I just wonder if Paolo is more of a role man that could play on and off the ball, how much that would aid his development. I think it's good he's getting on-ball reps, but I kind of wish you could use him as more of a small ball five of sorts. And offensively, I mean, defensively, he had some good stops in this game too on Tatum, where he was defending very well. I would like to see him have that pressure taken off of him so he can apply himself more as a playmaker and defensive player.
I feel like Franz Wagner has showcased more of those point guard like skills to initiate the offense. It's weird with Orlando because when they made the KCP signing, everybody loved it. It was one of the best moves of the offseason. People projected the Magic to be a much better team. Now, injuries have really tanked this team with Suggs being out and Mo Wagner, and those are two pivotal parts of their team.
Yeah.
But even the Paul George signing, when he was signed to the Sixers, you could kind of see the kind of panic. Paul George injury prone, Joel Embiid. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work out. But the KCP signing, it felt like an obvious plug and play culture fit defensive guy who can hit open threes. And he just hasn't done it. Since January, he's been more efficient from three. Yeah. But overall, I think you
Pull it
look at
up.
the numbers, Paolo's averaging 32, 9, and 4 in this series, and Franz is averaging 27, 6, and 5. I can't remember a duo that has been this young and this good in a first round series averaging these numbers. You can probably point to like the Celtics wings and stuff, but even then,
That's the first one.
some
Yeah.
pretty high praise if we're
Mhm.
comparing them to them. I think the Magic are trending in a good direction, and the Celtics every year, whoever wins the championship, it doesn't matter who it is, they get the benefit of the doubt. Last year, when Denver was coming off their championship, nobody envisioned them losing in the playoffs at all, especially to the Timberwolves. And I think sometimes because a team wins, we overestimate that everything's going to go right for them. And Denver, they didn't have injuries outside of the Jamal Murray thing that really bothered them a whole bunch. The Jamal Murray thing was kind of a big deal, but he had some moments in the Lakers series where it looked like he was getting over it. And then going to Minnesota was a huge challenge for him. With
Mhm.
Boston, they kind of give me that similar energy where they have the players to where everything should work out great. But Tatum's dealing with a wrist. Clearly didn't bother him today. He played
No.
amazing.
Yeah.
Jalen Brown's still dealing with this kind of lingering knee issue. He played well in games 1 and game 2, was inefficient in game 3. Porzingis has really shot poorly as of recently. And then Drew Holiday is kind of older and he doesn't have that same shot
That
making that
year.
he had
Sure.
last year. So with the Celtics, things can maybe they just go back to back and this all doesn't matter, but overall, it just feels like it's very hard to go back to back, and something always tends to go wrong. And people or underestimate that when you win a championship, you really need everything to exactly go right. And if it doesn't, you tend to not win.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we haven't seen a team repeat since Golden State in 2018. Even then, they're coming off a season where they built the best team to ever be constructed, I think, in NBA history. And I say I think, but I mean, if the Celtics are able to repeat a second time, and they tried to and nearly could have a third time, one or two injuries, like you highlighted, can change everything. And I feel like for Boston, they've had a couple. I mean, I feel like the biggest question right now is just Porzingis' performance because in the regular season, he's been great. If he starts to shoot better, I think a lot of the questions can kind of be alleviated. But it's good that they've kind of had this. I think this series, they're not really at risk of losing. And so there's not as much pressure, so they're allowed to rest a veteran like Drew Holiday, and then hopefully in the second round he's closer to 100% because he was great to start this series, of course. But I think for Boston, it's going to come down to the Cavs last year were out earlier in the postseason; they were done in the second round after losing to them. And I think that's helpful for the Cavaliers being pretty healthy this year. Last year they had multiple stars dealing with injuries, and it really comes down to every single year you're going to nitpick. This team won a championship. They had things go their way. It's always the survival of the fittest. And I think this season is why it's the Cavaliers' best chance. And if it's not now, it's never for them to go on a finals run where the Celtics are dealing with a few injuries. So it's going to be really interesting. The Celtics are the better team, but so often in the NBA, the best team does not end up winning. We saw it year after year after year following the Warriors dynasty. And that's what's made the parity in the NBA as tight as it's been in the last 7, 8 years.
Now, the last thing we'll talk about is the NFL draft. If you guys have any questions about that, you guys can put it in the chat about if you want to hear about who won, who lost. The biggest story is that Shedeur Sanders is not drafted yet.
Mhm.
And I kind of feel bad for him at this point because did you see the video that went viral of somebody prank calling him?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it's insane that he hasn't been drafted yet. Now, I understand that he's not an elite level prospect. And that's something that I said on last night's stream as well. So him not going in round 1 is tolerable. I can accept it.
Mhm.
Not going in round 2 and round 3,
Yeah.
that's where I kind of think like something's going on here. Dylan Gabriel was drafted over him. There's
Yeah,
no world
that was a shock. That's a big
there's
shock to
no
me.
world where I think Dylan Gabriel was better than Shedeur Sanders. The
Mhm.
Seahawks got Milrow. At least I can see it because of the athletic tools and talent. Okay, betting on upside, it makes sense. But for the Saints to select Tyler Shuck, the Browns to select Dylan Gabriel, and
And
then
the
the
Giants.
Raiders had back-to-back picks at the end of the third, and they went offensive lineman. And I'm like, what are we missing with Shador? Like the only explanation for this is he was genuinely awful in the interview process. Like so bad that teams are just, I don't want to deal with it. I'm good. And that's why he hasn't been drafted yet.
Yeah, it's been shocking. I wanted the Steelers to take him in the third round 'cause I felt even if Shedeur Sanders is not gonna end up being an elite quarterback, if you get a solid starter in the third rounds, that is a huge plus and great value there. And obviously, the Steelers right now, their quarterback is Mason Rudolph, who we all view as a good backup, but not quite a 17-game starter. I was surprised yesterday when the Giants traded back in and they take Jackson Dart. And I think the logic behind that pick is that Dart needs to sit a year, whereas Shedeur Sanders is more NFL ready. And you can make the case Dart has more NFL tools between his athleticism, a live arm, and you can mold that if he sits behind Russ. And even Jameis Winston, I think the energy that he brings as a former first overall pick could be impactful developing a player. So I didn't totally agree with the Giants. Shedeur Sanders is a better prospect to me. The process that they had sort of made sense to me. When I saw the Browns take Dylan Gabriel in the end of the third round over Shadur Sanders, that's where the line was crossed, and it, to me, became more than just football. I feel like Shedeur is a player. I'm in the middle on him. He reminds me a lot of Geno Smith, but just with a weaker arm. And Geno's a really good quarterback, but his arm is one of his two biggest traits. And the NFL, I think that makes it harder on Shedeur. And on top of that, because of how poor his offensive line was, we saw this with Caleb Williams as a rookie. His pocket presence really struggled because he tried to do more than what he needed to. I think that's a question of almost, and we saw this with Kenny Pickett when he got drafted to the Steelers, did that kind of scar his pocket presence and his ability to stand tall and maneuver pressure? But I feel like the Steelers were the only team that really had a need, and they were aware that most of these other teams, the Titans, they just took a quarterback with the first overall pick. The Saints took Shook, a little bit surprised by that. I also am kind of a fan of his game if he's healthy. So to me, it comes down to the Steelers recognizing that, and this reminds me a lot of a quarterback in 2022 who fell, Sam Howell. He was projected to be not only a first round pick, but a top 3 guy before the 2021 season. He struggles with UNC after they lose their best receiver, and immediately his draft stock fell from first round to day 2. And not many teams are interested. They're going to pick it over him. Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder had a great senior season, and he fell all the way to the third round, all the way to day 3, the 5th round, where the Commanders took Carson Wentz in through a trade. And I think they're showing a vote of confidence in Wentz then by saying we're not going to take quarterback early. I think for the Steelers, they want Aaron Rodgers because that's their best option after losing Fields and Wilson. And they know consciously if no one else is going to take him, and we can get this guy in the 4th or 5th round, and we're trying to convince Rodgers to stay, the best way to do that's not signing or drafting a quarterback that's 21 years old. If you really want Aaron, you're going to invest in the running back position. And I feel like the need there was dire because Jalen Warren is a great complimentary back, but we saw him deal with injuries for the better part of last year. And Caleb Johnson fills a very big need there. So I'm happy with the pick. I was shocked. I wanted Shedeur there, but it does feel like Pittsburgh's looking at this and saying we can get him a pick in 123. But
This
it's
has been the biggest story of the draft. Everybody's talking about it because Shedeur Sanders is a name that even the most casual football fan knows. That's
Mhm.
Deion Sanders' kid. It's Shedeur Sanders. And I think the NFL is telling us how they feel about Shedeur. They feel like he's an average quarterback prospect. There's really nothing special about him.
Mhm.
But the public opinion of him is that he is special because he's Deion Sanders' kid. He went to Colorado and he played well. And I think to be fair to Shedeur, the infrastructure he had at Colorado, it wasn't a good one. He didn't have a running game. He didn't have an offensive line.
Mm-mm.
I was looking at articles to see how Shedeur Sanders responded or how teams viewed him in the interview process. And on Monday after the combine, multiple reports cited anonymous team sources saying Shedeur was brash and arrogant, unprofessional and disinterested, and hit the wrong notes in his combine interviews. This was an ESPN article. And then in a February interview, ESPN commentator Kevin Clark, he asked Sanders which quarterback he watches and wants to model his game after. And his answer was that I watch my own tape, he said, adding that it would be a little disrespectful to his dad, the best player to ever play the game, if he looked up to anyone else in that way. Now, I understand not looking up to somebody, but I kind of think it's common for quarterbacks to just study other quarterbacks' film and
Yeah.
learn things from them. So I think right now what's happening, not to make it political, because I think a lot of people are going to touch on the political and the race war aspect of it, and I just want to talk about football. I
Yeah.
think that a lot of NFL teams just feel like Shedeur Sanders is going to come into the room and feel like he deserves to be the face of a franchise when they might just view him as a backup quarterback. And they don't think that a backup quarterback is worthy of that type of baggage. The Raiders have Geno Smith. Even if they drafted Shadur Sanders, he's nowhere near Geno Smith. And I don't think they want to deal with all of the spotlight that's going to come with Shadur Sanders. And there are players that can get away with being arrogant and overly confident. Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck, generational talents, Joe Burrow, bona fide first overall picks. They can get away with saying the wrong things. Even then, Caleb didn't say the wrong things. People just hated him because they hated him. Joe
Mhm.
Burrow was extremely humble. Andrew Luck was extremely humble. Trevor Lawrence got bashed for saying that, he's not like super in love with football. And that was his big thing coming out the draft. But overall, they kind of didn't carry themselves in this arrogant way that Shador has carried himself. And
Right.
when you're not an elite tier prospect and you carry yourself in that way, a lot of teams are kind of just saying, listen, we don't think you're as big of a deal as you think you are. And I think this is a learning lesson for Shadur Sanders, because I'd be lying if I said that although I disagree with his slip in the draft, I'd be lying if I didn't think that Shadur Sanders has handled this entire draft process well. This is a
Right.
job interview. He didn't
Yeah.
throw at the combine with all his other peers. He walked into it like, I should go top 3. And
Mhm.
he carried himself in that way. And we got a lot of these anonymous sources saying that this is how they felt about him. He was arrogant. And when you're not a great prospect and they kind of feel like there's like an unwillingness to learn and think that you know it all and you're ready for the moment,
Right.
it turns a lot of teams off.
Absolutely. And I feel like a big part of it is Deion Sanders was his coach his entire life, his dad throughout his 2 years at 4 years in college, and then dating back to high school. At every step, his dad has been his coach. And I feel like for a lot of NFL teams, they look at that and he's been empowered through not only NIL, but also the connection that he has with his father. And the Colorado team, the last 2 years he's played on, where they had a successful turnaround. This last year, they went 9-4. There's no doubt that Shedeur Sanders, I think, can be a solid quarterback in the NFL. I feel like for so many teams, they look at him coming in where he has a sense of bravado to him, which turns teams off. So often with young quarterbacks, you want them to be a sponge. I think a good example of this is maybe Jordan Love, who goes to Green Bay. It's a so much about quarterback play is intangibles, and you want to strike teams with the confidence that you're going to develop. It's not that Shador Sanders hasn't, but it does give up a presence of where he feels like he doesn't need to prove himself. And quite frankly, he has very average tools for an NFL quarterback, and he had fantastic production at Colorado. Don't get me wrong, but the NFL draft targets quarterbacks based off their traits and their potential. And when you don't have a live arm and you're not the most athletic quarterback and you're not the most gifted at evading pressure, you want to see that quarterback really showed that humility that I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing for him to be confident because we've seen him be one of the most clutch quarterbacks in college football the last couple of years. That same confidence carries itself to high leverage moments. And that's why I do like him as a prospect. And I believe that he can be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but you just want to say the right things and do the right things. And really, when the Browns made the pick of Dylan Gabriel over him, that was where to me it became clear that pre-draft process for him ended up being his Achilles heel. And he could have been an early second round pick, possibly, if he embraced it more with an eagerness to apply himself. And I think that's a big thing for young prospects to look at. It's for as great of a player as you may be, for as good as your college resume may have been, if you're not a truly generational prospect, if you're not someone who's already mocked to be in the first round, if the tape shows that you're a first round pick, you have that leeway. But it felt like with Shador it wasn't the case. And this is a learning lesson for not only him, but so many prospects, I think, in the future.
This is like, it's not just that he was passed up on by some teams. He's been passed up on by every team,
Hmm.
some teams multiple times already.
Yeah.
So I think teams are kind of showing you that collectively they didn't really have the best time interacting with him in the pre-draft process. Now, there's a lot of like facts that come out about Shedeur that I feel like are kind of manufactured. One thing that isn't manufactured is he was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, and he was great last year at Colorado.
Mhm.
But there's this stat that's manufactured, or a fact that's manufactured, that's like Shedeur Sanders is the first player ever to get his number retired by a school and not go in the first round. Shedeur played at Colorado 2 years. His first year, they had a losing record. His
Mhm.
second year, they had a winning record. He played really well, but they didn't even win a bowl game, and they retired his number. Now, is that like how many quarterbacks get their number retired by not winning a bowl game at their school and just having like a good statistical season?
Yeah, I get that. I do feel like the celebrity status and the attention that he attracted from transferring from Jackson State to Colorado, it not only turned around the program, but it brought so much attention and notoriety to the school that I understand totally them retiring his number. He had a fantastic season. And to me, it goes beyond football and it goes into more of a player empowerment era in college football where you can have a presence and impact that completely changes a school financially because he was the biggest player alongside Travis Hunter and it was the biggest storyline in college football. When a program's been dead for a long time, that to me makes it worthy that he does get his number retired. I feel like stats like that, you're gonna have a new one every single year where you can pull something out of the hat and it can tell a story. I will say this, I really want the Steelers to take him in the 4th round, and
Yeah, it's too good to pass up on at that
I
point.
not only is the value there, but I like a quarterback that's been motivated and kind of disrespected by the entire NFL. My favorite player
Yeah.
growing up is Antonio Brown. He gets passed on by all 32 teams 6 times, until he's taken by the Steelers on day 3. I feel like for a lot of athletes, that gives you an opportunity to channel an energy where, as an underdog, you give elite athletes a little bit of something to really remember. Amon-Ra St. Brown's another kind of historical example of this. If you're an elite athlete, you're gonna use that motivation as fuel to get better,
The
and I'm
Dylan
excited for
Gabriel.
Pittsburgh to have that opportunity because after the Browns took Dylan Gabriel, I'm pretty confident there's really not a team, maybe the Colts, that'd be interested in taking him over the Steelers, but if I'm Pittsburgh, the value's too good, and he's a solid prospect. I feel like when you look at his play on the field, there's to me, I compare him to Kenny Pickett, he's a better prospect. I think he's got more, especially in his accuracy and his ball placement. That to me is a different level than Kenny Pickett. So I'm kind of eager and I'm excited to see him maybe get that chance by a team that like Pittsburgh. You have an infrastructure there. You really do. The offense line's better, the run game's better, the defense is going to be incredible. And I think that could be a place where he succeeds.
Yeah, I mean, the Dylan Gabriel pick was the final straw.
Yeah.
Now, real quickly, if you guys have any draft questions, I'll answer them now. But I have my draft winners, day 1 and day 2 draft
Mhm.
winners. These are my favorite teams. Number 1, the Patriots. I think they're absolutely nailing this draft. Will Campbell getting a solid left tackle for the future. Travion Henderson, a starting caliber running back. Kyle Williams out of Washington State. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. I love Kyle Williams. And they drafted Jared Wilson, center out of Georgia. I think they drafted 4 starters. Will
Mhm.
Campbell and Jared Wilson can start on the offensive line. Henderson and Kyle Williams at receiver. And now Drake May has an infrastructure. You have Will Campbell and Cole Strange and Michael Wenu and Morgan Moses, and you have Garrett Bradbury and Jared Wilson at center, whoever wins that battle, with Stephon Diggs and Pop Douglas and Kyle Williams and Hunter Henry and
Yeah.
Ramondre and Travion Henderson. And then I'm not even mentioning the additions they made on defense in free
A
agency.
lot.
The Patriots have had an A plus off season, free agency and draft so far.
Yeah, I was a little bit torn on this because the Patriots' track record at drafting receivers has been the worst in football. I felt they should have went Tet. T-Mac would have been a player that I think is a number 1 wide receiver. Whereas with Will Campbell, I'm a little bit skeptical because to me, I think his best position is guard. Just based off of everything that we've seen so far, I feel like you can't go wrong going offensive line. But I feel like at 4, they should have made a bolder play. And to me, it's really a similar question to what the Chargers all last year. Do you go Joe Alt or do you go receiver? And it was reported after the fact it was Brian Thomas who they were wrestling with taking. And I feel like that kind of puts into, and Malik Neighbors, another guy, of course, there. I think that kind of puts a very similar question with this Patriot team, kind of looking back at the receivers they did pass on in favor of Kyle Williams later. that's going to be a big question to me. I think my biggest winners in the draft, there's some easy ones. To me, the first one I think of is Bryce Young for that same exact reason. I think he got a
Yep.
true number one receiver. Along with that, Jordan Love, I think he's going to be a very happy camper after this draft. And one more quarterback to me would have to be, before I even get there, I think the Falcons prioritizing edge rusher, I think that was a big hit. But between the Panthers, the Packers, and the Commanders going offensive line, I think
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels would be my last big winner because last year you improved the offensive line a lot in free agency. I think targeting tackle at both spots was huge to them. You get Larry Tunsil at left tackle. Now you're getting another player through the draft at right tackle. So I'd say for those three young quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Jaden Daniels, and Jordan Love, they are very big winners in this. And one more, another quarterback, Jackson Dart going in the first round. I think New York is a good situation for him because for Brian Dable, it kind of takes the pressure off of him and Joe Shane because they're pretty much tied together, their job security. You almost can't fire them until you see what Jackson Dart is because that's a bold move. I think the Giants are in a very similar situation to Pittsburgh where the defense is going to be really good. And you've got an elite number one receiver in the making. The offense line is getting better. So I feel like for him, the Giants are the best possible spot. And his draft stock rising in the first round, I wouldn't have taken him in the first round, but I think that's one of the biggest winners far and away of the cycle.
The Packers officially planted the "we don't trust our wide receivers" flag with this draft. They drafted Matthew Golden and they drafted Savion Williams out of TCU in the third round. Somebody's going to be the odd man out there in the current core. It's just about who's it going to be, but clearly they don't trust them. The other teams I had in my top five, the Eagles are number two, Jahad Campbell and Andrew Mabuka. I
Mm-hmm.
think Jahad is a Pro Bowl level talent. Andrew Mabuka, I think he can be argued as the best safety in this class. I think he's that good. He's just a little bit undersized, and that's why he fell in the draft. And his tackling wasn't the best. His tackling film was a bit all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
The Panthers at three, you mentioned it. Ted McMillan, but then in the second round, in the third round, Dave Canales said it, and after the draft presser, he said, I ran a bunch of variations of my mock draft, and I had no idea we could get Nick Scorton in the second round, and then Princely Uman from Ole Miss in the third round. Like, these were awesome moves that the Panthers made. Not only did they get Brycing a receiver, but after investing into the interior of their defensive line of free agency, they got two edge rushers. And Nick Scorton, he was Shamar Stewart's teammate at Texas A&M, and he was the best player on their defense. But Shamar has the athletic upside, which is why he was drafted higher. But Nick Scorton was a first-round pick to me.
Yeah.
And falling to the second round and the Panthers getting him, I thought that was a steal.
I love what the Panthers did, and I feel like it's most encouraging after the improvement they made in the second half of last year that you build off that momentum and you don't stay stagnant. One more winner, which I'm surprised they haven't mentioned yet. Walter Nolan goes at 16, second round. What the Cardinals do, they get Will Johnson, who fell a lot. He was the top half of the first round pick, and there was a clear red flag with his medicals because of his knee. But you look at Arizona's biggest needs, it was D-line, it was upgrading the secondary. They hit D-line time and time again for agency. They get Josh Sweat, they had a couple of other veterans in there. Huge improvements. But to get Walter Nolan as well, I think that was a player that could have possibly been gone at 16. And the guy you get in the second round at corner was an awesome player at Michigan for 2 years. He could have been a pick at 16 that you look at that and you say it's an A pick. So I felt like for them to add more talent, infusing more upside into a group that John Gannon's done a fantastic job maximizing subpar kind of talent, it bodes really well for a Cardinal team that was in first place for a little bit. They were in driver's seat in that NFC West last year. So obviously they kind of fell back in the standings. So I think Drew even said in the group chat, he's like, I'm packing my bags to Arizona because they had an absolute huge day last two days.
Yeah, my last two, the Jets at 4, Armin Membu, Mason Taylor, Azaria Thomas. I think those are all three capable starters. And then the Seahawks at 5, Gray Zabel, Nick Emenwari, who doesn't have to cover in Seattle because they have Julian Love, so he can play in the box a lot. Elijah Arroyo, a vertical threat at tight end, and taking a gamble on Jalen Milroe. Why not? Let's just gamble. Let's just throw the dice. I think Shedeur probably would have been too big of a personality with Sam Darnold recently getting signed. So Jalen Milroe kind of makes a lot of sense. And just my top 5 favorite picks in round 2 and 3. In round 2, Luther Burden to the Bears. Thought it was a steal. Will Johnson to the Cardinals, you mentioned. Mike Green to the Ravens. Absolutely ridiculous.
Who
They
let them
got
get
him.
him and Malachi Starks?
Absolutely ridiculous. The Chiefs, Omar Norman Lott. I love the Chiefs' first 2 draft picks. And the Chargers getting Trey Harris. The Chargers, Omarion Hampton, Trey Harris, Najee Harris, Lad McConkey.
Mhm.
The Chargers look freaking awesome on
Yeah,
offense now.
yeah. There's a few more teams. I think everyone in the AFC North kind of had really good drafts. The Bengals picked Shamar Stewart at 17. I wasn't a huge fan of
No.
comparatively to the Steelers, Ravens, and Browns. I thought Cleveland trading back, getting Mason Graham, you stockpile more young talent and more draft picks. They had a great day, but the two winners that I think kind of get overlooked, they've been drafting very well, and especially the Ravens in the better part of the last couple of years. Getting Malachi Starks to pair alongside Kyle Hamilton and then Darius Washington, because you move Kyle Hamilton all over the box, those 3 safety packages they could use to Starks, who just fell right into their laps, is ridiculous. And then on top of that, you just infuse more young talent into that edge rush room, which they desperately kind of needed with Van Noy being older. He's played so well. It's similar to Cam Hayward, where you do want to have a succession plan after him, given his age, even if he's playing at an elite level, that is. But I felt the Steelers had a fantastic draft, too. A
Yep.
lot of fans were upset that they didn't go quarterback. And my philosophy always is, as a football fan, that you shouldn't reach on a quarterback that doesn't have traits to change a franchise. And I felt like Shedeur Sanders wasn't, if you put him in last year's draft class, top 4 quarterback. And I felt like reaching on him in the first round, as we saw today, he fell to the 4th round. I think that was smart. I believe Pittsburgh learned from the mistake that Kevin Colbert made in the way out, taking Kenny Pickett because fuck it, why not? We need a quarterback. And then
Yep.
you waste a first round pick. You shot it down the drain. In this class, you get Derek Carman, who has an incredible story. I think he's going to be a perfect mentee for Cam Hayward. He's also a great player. I went to that Steelers wildcard game versus Baltimore, and it was deflating to watch Derrick Henry have 300 rushing yards and Lamar Jackson. That, as the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a team that's notorious, much like the Giants are having elite front sevens, was your biggest need this all season. I felt like you need to fix that before you really focus on drafting a quarterback. And Harmon's going to be an incredible player. I mean, that to me was the perfect fit, big need, and incredible value at pick 21. I think Caleb Johnson, based off the year he had this year at Iowa, was great too. And now in the 4th round, you have a chance to get the quarterback because you played your cards right that people wanted you to take in the first round 100 picks before. If you get
Yep.
Shadur Sanders, I think them and the Ravens are 2 of like the 4 biggest team winners in this draft class.
Yeah, if they don't get Shedeur in the 4th round, I don't know where he's gonna go. It just feels
Mhm.
so obvious. And in round 3, Darius Alexander to the Giants, Harold Fannin Jr. to the Browns,
Mhm.
Siobhan Revel Jr. to the Cowboys, getting a first round talent all the way in the 3rd round. I think
Incredible.
the Cowboys have had a pretty solid draft. The
Mhm.
Texans getting Jalen Noel. They drafted both Iowa State receivers in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel.
Mhm.
And I felt like it was a pretty big need for them because
Mhm.
of Tank Dell's injury and Christian Kirk being unreliable. I like that they double dipped. And the Rams getting Josiah Stewart. I think Josiah Stewart is one of the more ready, polished edge rushers in this draft. So I like that a lot for them. But that's going to do it for us on this stream. Thank you guys for watching. Any closing thoughts, John? Are you changing your series pick to the Timberwolves?
Listen, I don't change much. Injuries do play a role in every single series, man. I'll tell you one thing. Uh,
You're
I
changing to the
wasn't here
Clippers?
yesterday. I was at formal yesterday. I had some people telling me I was ducking in the comments. No, I wasn't. I would have been here. The Nuggets Clippers series looks decided because half of the Nuggets lineup is injured. Aaron Gordon's
Okay.
dealing with an injury. Michael Porter Jr. shoulder shot, and Russell Westbrook left game 3. So yeah, the Clippers are going to win that series. I mean, there's nothing Nuggets can do if they're playing multiple non-shooters, Nikola Jokic. As far as the Lakers T-Wolves series, I'm not changing my pick, but right now Minnesota's the better team. And my confidence in this series really resting on Luka and LeBron playing at a superb level. They haven't
Yeah.
yet. Once they
It can
do,
happen though, yeah.
they can rip off 2 wins. They're up 3-2. But I do want to say one thing. It's devastating that the Nuggets are in the situation because they had no depth. Half their lineup's injured. And the Clippers are the best solution for Nikola Jokic. And that is a combination of really good perimeter defense and Ivica Zubac. So I guess you could say it's my one pick and my change. It was a good run, but it's over for the Nuggets for the season.
It's unfortunate. Back to the drawing board next offseason. But that's going to do it for us. Game 3 reaction and some NFL draft talk. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.